Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another how-to video. I'm recording this on January 13th, 2016. In the last episode, we had finished up our chapter on test-driven development. What we had done is test-driven our tabs library, which you can see right here. As a reminder, what we're building here is a little tab application that's going to have multiple tabs on a web page, and we'll switch between those tabs when we click. Now you'll notice that despite having finished the library, we haven't actually hooked this up yet. It doesn't work. That's what this chapter is about. We're actually going to wire up the tabs to the production code or to the web page. Before we get into that though, I just want to take a look back at what we did in the test-driven development chapter as we actually developed this library. There's a few things that I want you to particularly notice about what we did. One thing I'd like you to notice is how much refactoring we did. We were refactoring all the time. We were constantly looking for ways to improve the code. This is something that I would like you to do in your production code. You may have noticed we didn't do a lot of design in advance. We didn't do a lot of thinking about exactly how is this going to be built, but we did a lot of thinking about how good is what we have built and what we are going to build next. So we are very focused on what do we have right now, what are we going to do next, and how can we keep what we have right now really simple. If you're in school, you may have learned a more design-centric approach. You may have been told sort of plan out everything you're going to build, figure out what all the methods are going to be. That works fine for small applications, but for large applications, which are going to have features added that were never planned in the beginning. And even if you don't ever do that, which never happens, even if you build only the things that were planned from the beginning, significant applications are too big for you to plan out and do detailed design on successfully in a way that really accommodates all the things that are possibly going to come up. That cannot be done with a large application. The only way to build a large application is to do it in the way I'm describing now, which is look at what you have, figure out how to make it better, and how to add the next thing and how to make that fit together. The secret to doing really good design in this style, which you need to know how to do if you're going to do significant applications, is to figure out how to refactor your code so that the code you have right now is beautiful code that looks like it was purpose-built for exactly what you have right now. And then when you add to it, you add that new little thing and then you refactor, so now the code looks like it's purpose-built again for just what you have right now. And that's why we're doing so much refactoring. I also want you to notice how little time we spent getting to a green bar in our code. A green bar, of course, is when we have passing tests. The test-driven development loop of think, red, green, refactor, repeat is designed to keep you in good code, known good code, code that you know works. So you'll notice that as soon as we have something that doesn't work, we do the smallest, simplest, not even the highest quality thing, just the dumbest thing we can do to get back to a green bar, and then we refactor. That way, as we refactor, we're staying in a state where we know what's going on. And if something doesn't work, often the fastest way to get back to known good code is just to undo. So if you go back and watch the videos again, notice that too, that we really focus on staying at a green bar. When we make a mistake, it's often obvious what we did, and when it isn't, we undo until we're back to a green bar. Another thing I'd like you to notice is how small the steps are when we refactor. This is related to keeping things at a green bar. When we refactor, we do just a little bit, and then we test and prove that everything is still working, that our refactoring didn't break anything, which it did on occasion. And then we make another small refactoring. This is one of the harder things about test-driven development. Actually, maybe it's the hardest thing. It's figuring out how to take these really small steps, not just in terms of what to test, but also when you're refactoring, taking really small steps. Often when people talk about refactoring, what they really mean is they're going to delete a function and rewrite it. That's not good refactoring. It is technically a refactoring if you don't change the behavior, but it's not what people who really know what they're doing mean when they say refactoring. Refactoring is taking just a little bit of something and tweaking it and moving it around. And you'll see that if you go back and watch that chapter again. Something else that you might notice here, and that I wouldn't be surprised if people asked about, is there's no comments in here. there are no comments in here, and why not? Often in school, you're taught that you're not writing good code if you're not commenting it liberally. Comments are good, but in the TDD community, in the Agile engineering community, people tend to have this perspective that comments are a perfume. They're a way of disguising bad smells in your code. So if you see the need to comment something, if you see something that's unclear and it needs a comment, it might be better to refactor it. For example, here, we could add a comment that says, what we want to do right here is hide all tabs except the tab to show. That would be a good comment. It would make this code more clear. But another way to do that would be to factor this method out into a function called hide all tabs. Or even hide all tabs, but tab to show, and put the tab to show code in there as well. If we do that, then we no longer need the comment. The same thing could be done here. Hide all content except the content to show. And there's various ways to slice this. I'm not actually going to make this change right now, but if you're following along, especially if you're doing the challenge exercises, look at the code and ask yourself what isn't totally clear, what comments would you add to make it more clear, and then how can you change the code so it doesn't need the comment? How can you refactor it to be more clear? Now, personally, for me, I feel like this is clear enough. So that's why I'm not going to go ahead and refactor it now. But often when I'm pairing, I find that I have a higher bar and I do a better job of figuring out how to make the code readable. But the goal, again, is to make the code readable without comments. That doesn't mean don't put in comments. It means, if you can't make the code clear without comments, then absolutely put in comments. And you will see that I do put in comments in more complicated code, especially if you watch the live channel with the WeWikiPaint exercise. We definitely have some comments in that code. But I tend to see comments as a sign of failure in some way. Something that I have done is not as clear as I could make it, and that's why I'm putting the comment in. So use comments if you need them, but try to figure out how not to do them. All right, so that is what we've been working on. We have test-driven this library, lots and lots of practical hands-on, here's how TDD looks. Now that that's done, we are ready to start a new chapter. And what we're going to do in this chapter is wire up our tab library to our web page. If you're following along and doing the coding exercises, one thing I'd like you to do is grab the latest CSS code. I made a minor change to the CSS for what I'm planning to do in this chapter, so go ahead and grab that. This is the URL right here. I got a comment from a viewer asking, how is it that we're doing all this development? We're basically building the entire application, and at no point do we actually have the ability to see if it's working. This is something that test-driven development does allow you to do because we have these tests and the tests are telling me that what we're doing is working, or at least the tests are telling me that I'm doing what I think I'm doing, which is not exactly the same as building something that's working. This is a style of development that I call middle-out development. You may have heard of top-down development. That's where you start with the UI and you build things out and you see that they work. Or there's bottom-up development, which is where you do a detailed design and then you start in the leaves of the system and you build them and then you hook them together. Middle-out development is basically starting with some major chunk that is testable, test driving that, and then hooking it into the rest of the system. And that's what we're doing here. We could have done it in a different way where we hooked up the code here in our app, and that would be a valid way to do it. I just chose not to do it for this series. Anyway, let's go ahead and hook this up now. We have our app here, and we need to make it go. Let's start out by again, we're going to take small steps, even though we're not going to test drive this piece. If we were to test drive this, that would need something called an end-to-end test to make sure that our HTML and our JavaScript was actually hooked up. And that's a bigger topic than I want to do in this channel. But if you'd like to see more about smoke testing and end-to-end testing, check out the live channel, particularly these episodes right here. However, even though we're not doing 2DD, I do still want to take small steps. So let's start out by just doing a hello and running our app and seeing if that shows up. And spoiler, it's not going to. I know this because I tried it, because we do not actually have our app bundle linked in our HTML. So that's the first thing to do. We need to link in our script, which is going to have the source bundle.js. And there we go. And I'm also going to add the defer attribute, which for modern browsers says you don't need to wait to load the rest of the page before you load this script. So now that we've done that, we can reserve. And if we load up our console and reload, we should see hello. I'm not seeing it though. What's up with that? Oh, did you see that? I was editing the distribution index file. That's a easy mistake to make. Let's edit the proper index.html. See, this is why I take baby steps, because if I don't, I'm always making some dumb mistake. And if I make a lot of changes, I don't realize what the mistake was. All right, let's try that now. So there's our hello. Good. Now what we need to do is actually set up our tab. Now, in order to do this, there's something we need to do. We need to wait until the DOM has been loaded because we're operating on the DOM. And if you're used to a library like jQuery, then you're probably familiar with doing something like this, where you pass a function to $, and it won't run that until your document is ready. Since we're not using jQuery, we have to use the more fundamental event that the browser will fire to us. The way you do that is you say document.addEventListener. This is just the same as the way we added events on our tabs when we said tab.element.addEventListener, listen for click. We're going to ask the document to tell us when it's loaded, and we can do that by listening for the DOM content loaded event on the document. So if I do that, this will run when the document is loaded. Now, because we're all running this locally and the system is nice and the network is nice and fast locally, you're probably not going to notice a difference here. But believe me, this is important. Otherwise, you could get something called a race condition, where sometimes your code works and sometimes it doesn't, because sometimes it runs too soon and sometimes it runs at the right time. Anyway, we have our document loaded now. So let's go ahead and actually run our tabs library. We're going to need to require it. So I'm going to say require tabs.js, and then we'll run it. And the way we run it, well, let's look at our test code for an example. Remember, test code is documentation. And let's just grab this and use it. So we've got tabs.initialize, and then we have our tabs. So we'll have to put those here, and then we have our content. So we'll have to put that here. And then we have our default tab. Our active tab class for us is active, and our hidden content class is hidden. Okay, the way we get our actual elements is we pull them out of the DOM, and the method we want to use is called getElementById. We can say document.getElementById, and then the name of the element we want. So if we look at our index.html, well, actually, we don't have any element names in here. So let's go ahead and add them. We have an ID of tab 1, tab 2, and tab 3, and then we'll need content. So I'll say ID equals content 1, content 2, and content 3. So those are what we're going to pull out. Now, one thing I don't like here about the way we're doing this is that we are hard coding these. We're going to have to hard code these strings. We have to say tab 1 and tab 2 and tab 3, and content 1, content 2, and content 3. But these strings, these are sort of magic strings. They have to be the same here and in our app. And how do we make sure that they are the same? That's a bit of a tricky one that we will get into in a later episode. Anyway, there's our tabs. Let's go ahead and make our contents. And then we can actually send them in here. We've got tab 1, tab 2, tab 3, and content 1, content 2, content 3, and our default tab will be tab 1, let's say. And with that, we should have everything wired up. Let's go ahead and give it a try. Moment of truth. So we should see all of this extra content disappear when we reload, and then we should finally have the ability to click back and forth between our tabs. Let's give it a try. Hey, there we go. Our tabs, our content has disappeared. Our active tab is highlighted. That is fantastic. Now all we need to do is click, click, click. We have a bug in our code, and I did not plan this in advance, although I have to admit I did know about it because I tried things out before I started this episode. But I think this is something really important to notice, which is that TDD cannot produce bug-free code. What it does is it ensures that you have written the code that you plan to write. So we plan to write code that, well, has a bug in it. We have a blind spot. So that's what we need to figure out. Next episode, we will talk about what do you do when TDD fails. Your exercise for this time, go ahead and wire up the code just as we have. Remember, what you're going to need to do is create your little app.js, and you're going to need to hook it in to your index.html, add that script tag, add the IDs. I recommend doing it incrementally just to make sure that there's no dumb mistakes along the way. If you're doing the challenge exercises, well, my challenge for you is to figure out what went wrong. What is going on here? Go ahead and debug it. You can either use the built-in browser debugger, or personally, I would probably just use the console, or you could just stare at the code and think real hard. I find that that often works too. Once you figure out what went wrong, think about how to fix it. Not just how to fix it, this specific bug, but what do you do when TDD fails? It's not just a matter of fixing the code. There's more you need to do, and we will talk about that next time. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.